Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm going to continue our topic. I don't think I am on. I am. I'm going to continue our topic of Revelation 16. Today we're going to cover 13 and 14, and 13 was one of the reasons why I wanted to cover this topic, because it's kind of a crazy verse. These three unclean spirits like frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. It goes on to say, "For they are the spirits of demons, working miracles, that go forth unto the kings of the earth, to the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of the Lord." And then we have Christ kind of interjects and says, hey, watch, right? Keep your garments, right? He's telling us something of a warning of what the spirit of the world is going to be before he comes, before Armageddon. So we're going to take a look today at, kind of defining who these characters are in this verse. Who's the dragon? Who's the beast? Who's the false prophet? And we'll kind of dissect verses 13 and 14 a bit. Now, last week, we just kind of went over the interpretations of Revelation, and the historical one. I thought we made the good case. That's the correct one. It's the one that our community has used. And when we look at the first 11 verses of Revelation 16, it speaks about the Napoleonic Wars, right? And I remember there was a brother several years ago. I was listening to a class on this, and I forget who he was. He was over in the UK, I think. And he was a professor of some sort, and he went to one of his colleagues who was a European history teacher, and he says, hey, listen, read this section. Read chapter 16 and tell me what this is in European history. And so the guy doesn't know his Bible, reads it, and he goes, well, if this is European history, then this is speaking about the Napoleonic Wars. And he was right on, right, because that's what the scripture says. So, with this historical viewpoint in mind, who's the historical frog? If you said, who were the frog people, people would say, oh, that's the Frenchmen, right, the freemen. Right, and this little clip here I stole from our brothers at the Bible magazine. They've got on the cover there the three frogs of the French Empire under King Clovis. This was on their coat of arms, right? So we just see this kind of relationship to the French, to the frogs. So when we come here to Revelation 13, it brings us back to the French Revolution. And that took place in Revelation 11. It's the second earthquake of three earthquakes of Revelation. The first was from paganism to Christianity under Constantine, and the next one was the French Revolution. And we looked at some of those Bible scholars way before the French Revolution took place, how they're reading the scriptures, they said, there's going to be a revolution in France. And it's considered to be one of the greatest historical events of mankind, because it was all about man, right? It elevated man, and anytime we elevate man, we degrade God. So it's that second one. They say it was the start of democracy, right? And they say that we still feel the tremors from that earthquake today, because after this revolutions took place, swept through Europe. They were all over the place. We still feel them today, right? In the Middle East with the Arab Spring, France is having their own little eruption nowadays. And where is it? Argentina or Venezuela? They got two have stood up. I was confused. Venezuela. Two. I'm the leader. No, I'm the leader. Right. So we still get this type of revolution going around in the world today. So what came out of it was this slogan, liberty, equality, and fraternity, and it's humanism, right? So before we go in and dissect verses 13 and 14, just want to touch a little bit upon defining humanism. We're going to get more into this. Can you see that? Not very well. Okay. Yeah, okay. And we'll get into this more next week, and how this spirit has come into religion, Christianity. It's all over the world. It's in politics. It's in our school systems. Right? And again, Christ is giving us the warning. It's to his servants at the end time, right before I come. This spirit's going to be in the world. be careful, so it can affect the ecclesia. And we'll take a look at some of that next week. So if we're just going to define humanism, a few things is it's a system of thought that focuses on the human and their potential value and goodness, rather than on the divine. Focus on self, man through reason and science can fix the problems of society. Right? The overall thing is, hey, the pursuit of happiness, right? You only have one life, make the most of it. That's the humanist. We're only here and there's nothing else beyond this. So have a good time. And, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. But, just don't hurt anybody. And then, you can spin that however you want. Who's hurting who? Right? So when we look at the frog-like spirit, right, there's a promise of freedom, right? Freedom of religion, or if you want, freedom from religion, right? Let's, God's laws, hey, let's make our own laws, right? And you can't blame the people of France for doing this because they were under the thumb of the Roman Catholic Church, right? The nobility and the Roman Catholic Church put a beating on the common people, right? So the revolt is like, yeah, let's get these guys out of here. Right? The equality is rebellion against authority. Again, the nobility was the ruling class, and the peasants, the common people, were just, getting their backs broken. Right? All men are equal. Right? Well, we have an authority; it's God, but yeah, we don't need to discuss him now. And then the fraternity, right? All men are brothers. Right? We're all the same, and nothing can separate that. And anything that tries to cause that to be separated, well, that's just wrong. Right? Because we all want to be like-minded, right? It's the pushing forward of being like-minded, right? We're supposed to be like the mind of Christ, right? But they're saying, no, let's have this, man-first type of mind. And if you turn with me to Romans chapter 1, Paul kind of speaks of the mindset of the person, the individual, that is going to put God away, right? I'm not going to listen to God. The Gentile world in unbelief. I'll pick it up in Romans chapter 1. We'll pick it up in verse 28. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do things which are not seemly, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness. And it goes on with all these terrible things that are manifested in the unenlightened person, the person that wants to ignore God, right? We're going to go our own way. Maliciousness, backbiters, haters of God, proud, boasters, without understanding, covenant breakers, so on and so forth. Verse 32, who knowing the judgment of God, that they who commit such things are worthy of death. Not only do they do the same, but they have pleasure in them that do it, right? We want to spread this around so we're all of the like-mindedness. Because, people who are thieves, criminals, who do they hang out with? Criminals and thieves, right? Abusers of drugs and alcohol. Who do they hang out with, right? The same. Birds of a feather flock together. So we want everyone to buy into this frog-like spirit, the spirit of humanism, right? It reminds me of when the king of Sodom, right, came out to Abraham and said, Abraham, great, that you saved our people, right? Excellent, great work, man. I'll tell you what, all the money that was stolen that you recouped, you keep it all. Just give me the people. Give me those people that are like-minded like me, right? Sodom was not a godly place, right? I want those. We'll get the wealth again, but give me those like-minded people. That was more valuable. Okay, so just keep that in mind as we kind of go through. Again, it's just a basic elevating of man and his principles and his beliefs and the degrading of God. And we'll get into more of that next week. Okay, so who are these characters involved in verse 13? Right? Well, the beast, this is an end time look at it. This is what our community believes. The beast, Catholic Europe. Okay? Now, the beast in Revelation, there's several beasts. Sea beast, earth beast. Who are all these beasts? Well, it's one beast. It's the Rome, but through different phases of Roman history. So this beast is situated in Rome. That's the image of Nebuchadnezzar, one foot there and the other foot over here in Constantinople. And that's the dragon. The dragon is the occupier of Constantinople, who we believe is going to be Russia. And we'll take a a little bit of a look at that as well. So the other thing we know about the beast from Revelation 17 and verse 3, it says that this beast, that there's a woman riding the beast. Well, what does that mean? Well, remember, Revelation is a book of symbol. So what does the woman represent prophetically in the scripture? Anybody?
Papacy?
Yeah, in this case it means the papacy. Yeah, the woman means the ecclesia, right? God, Paul says, I have to prepare you, speaking to the ecclesia, the true ecclesia, as a chaste virgin for your bridegroom, right? That means, pure doctrine, right? And here it represents the papacy, because she is a harlot, right? She's the mother of the harlots, and that is the papacy. And it says the papacy is on the beast, guiding it, right? So that's the EU, right? So we'll look next week. Is the woman, the papacy, trying to steer the EU, trying to have influence over it? And we're going to see that it does. And then the dragon, if we come to, let's go to Daniel chapter 2. We'll just read a few of these verses here. We're pretty familiar with Daniel, but we'll read a few verses. Daniel chapter 2, we're going to read verse 28. Daniel says, "For there is a God in heaven who revealeth secrets and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days." So this is a latter day prophecy that Daniel's given. It's about the latter days. In going over to verse 34, it says, he goes through the image that we know. He comes to verse 34, he says, "Thou sawest until a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon its feet." So the image is going to stand. "And it broke them in pieces, and then were the iron, the clay, the bronze, and the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together," right? So it has to stand together. So this latter day, reemergence of the Roman Empire is going to stand on two legs. And it's going to occupy the territory of the previous kingdoms. And the Roman Empire was probably the biggest, and I think it covers just about all the territory-wise of all those kingdoms combined. Babylon's was pretty small. But it also adopted a religious aspect, right? You've got Babylon, right, and mentioned in Revelation, the mystery of Babylon, right? Well, the Catholic religion, that's, a mystery is a big component of it. From the Greeks, they took the philosophy of the Greeks, the Plato's, and the immortal soul came from that. So they've adopted that's why she's the harlot. She's adopted all these beliefs from everybody else, all these pagan religions, kind of adopting all these type of things in. And then if you go over to, verse 40 tells us a little bit more. "And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdue all things, the iron that breaketh these things shall break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and the toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided." So we're looking for that divided kingdom, the two legs. It's going to be iron. It's the fourth beast. There isn't a fifth beast, right? And we know that Rome was the beast of John's day, right? It was the dragon of Revelation chapter 12. So Rome was the original dragon. When Constantine divided the kingdom into the two legs, he moved the power over to Constantinople. And then the dragon was there. Now, when the Turks came in and they took over the Eastern Roman Empire, the dragon moved. Okay, so the Orthodox Christian religion, some of them took back, and they went back to Rome. And others headed north. Where'd they go? Russia. That's right. They went up to Moscow. And Moscow became the third Rome. When Constantine moved it over to Constantinople, he says, "This is the new Rome," or the second Rome. And then they took off north. And Moscow said, "Yeah, the Russians, come on in. We'll take you on. We will be the third Rome." So the dragon power now resides up in Russia. But it's going to come down. A little confusing on that?
No.
No? Okay.
I couldn't repeat it, but it made sense when you were saying
Okay. Fair enough. You know, there's a ton of material on this. You go on YouTube, Christadelphian videos, and you'll see a ton of stuff, and you can walk yourself through it, you know, at your own pace and get a better understanding, I think, of it than I'm giving you now. So, we walk ourselves through a little bit of history, and we come to this man, Justinian. He was considered one of the great emperors, right? He did quite a bit, right? He consolidated the laws of Rome. Apparently, they still use some of that stuff. And what he also did was reunite the empire. Okay, at this point in time, the barbarians have taken over Rome, and they kicked the Pope out, and they persecuted the Catholics, and they were in charge. And Justinian, he still had that military might. So he said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to reunite the old Roman Empire. I'm going to bring it back. So he goes and he sends his military, and he kicks out the barbarians, and he tells the Pope, I'm going to put you back in charge, right? So he gains a lot of political power, right? He has Rome on his side. And he says, matter of fact, I'm going to make you, as it says over there, the head of all the churches, right? No longer is there going to be a division, you know, with the Archbishop of Constantinople, who's got the power. That was one of the things that divided them. Now I'm going to bring it all together. But, you know, don't forget this, I'm an autocrat. I'm really in charge, okay? And then you, but I'll decide most of these things. And so he did that. He reconquered some territory, united the empire, put into position who he wanted under one religion. You got to do that. And he beautified Constantinople. He built this place called Hagia Sophia, a Christian Orthodox cathedral that was massive. Took many years, lots of money. The thing was beautiful. He said something after it was built, something like, Solomon, I've outdone you. Okay, this is how great this place was. Okay, so just keep some of these things in mind. His wife was women's rights. Didn't even know it was around back then, but she was a fighter for women's rights. So he was a pretty great guy. But not only did he install, remove the barbarian tribes, put the Pope back into power, but he also said to the Pope, listen, we still got a problem. We still have some that believe in the Trinity and some that don't. We got to get rid of that. Because you really got to, if you want power, you got to consolidate everything, right? One religion. He goes, so I'm going to go back to what happened at the Council of Nicaea when Constantine ruled over that council and there was the big debate and they went Trinity. That's what we're going to do. So, you know what? Anyone who doesn't believe, if they're a heretic, they're an enemy of the state, you deal with them. Oh. So, this is from Revelation 13. The dragon, Justinian, right, in Constantinople, gave him his power, gave the beast his power, gave him his throne, and gave him great authority. So the Pope, ran with that, right? And as Deb mentioned last week with the St. Bartholomew's massacre, they went in, the Catholic clergy armed, brought some French soldiers armed to attack people that were not armed. And it was just a massacre, just a complete slaughter. And they were proud of it. And they commemorated it with a coin, saying, look what we did. You know why they could say that? Because it was the law. We followed the laws of man. We didn't do anything wrong, right? We were just following orders. Whew, that rings a bell, doesn't it? Just following orders. It was the law. We could kill the Jews if we wanted to, right? So this is what took place here. So now we have a united kingdom. That image is standing on its 2 feet. He reunited this kingdom. Political power with Rome and the military might in Constantinople. Well, of course, it wasn't going to last forever. So the Great Schism of 1054, these two got in an argument over something, you know. So it was always like, hey, the Pope is not the boss of us. Then Justinian said, just let him be. It works out in my favor. Okay. And so they split. And the differences were, you know, who had the power, the Archbishop of Constantinople or the Pope. Priests marrying and not marrying was another division. And then the Eastern Orthodox said to the Catholics, you guys are image worshipers. You worship all these icons. We don't go for that. Right? And they were right. However, they changed their opinion and they quickly just said, yeah, worshiping images is fun. We're going to do the same thing too, right? And so then they adopt that. But they excommunicated one another. And there was a few attempts along the years to try to maybe reconcile. It didn't quite work out until this time, not too long ago. I think it was 2016, right? Maybe you remember this, right? It was pretty big news in the news, right? The headlines were, finally, the Pope and the Russian Patriarch meet for the first time in nearly 1,000 years, right? And there was a pretty big thing in the news. They're bringing this back, right? And they said to each other, listen, it was a long time ago. We're brothers. We can get along. And doctrinal stuff, don't worry about it. Doctrine doesn't really matter anymore. No, what's important that we get the same agenda. And yeah, we can work together. So some of the things were peace for Christians. We're to protect Christianity in the Middle East. That was one of their things. And Christian family values. These are things that we have to push forward. And they were like, yeah, we're in agreement. We got the same agenda. Now, the agenda of these two is political power, right? The Pope, since really probably the French Revolution, when he had great power, has been always seeking to get it back and then realize, I'm never getting that type of power back. But I have to have a political influence in the world. And, you know, when Russia fell, they were cast out of the world, for crying out loud. They weren't a superpower. No one cared what they had to say, right? And they've been looking to get to be a big influence in the world again. So we expect to see a reunion of the beast, the EU, with the papacy riding on it, and the Eastern Foot in Constantinople, Russia, the dragon, coming back together. So we get that latter-day image. It's 2 feet, right? It's clay and it's iron. There's a Roman power element to it, but it's clay. It's not really going to stick. There's a lot of sticking points with the EU trying to come together as like the United States, because they get different languages, they get different cultures, different traditions, and all that type of stuff doesn't quite make them stick together like the idea comes across. So we expect to see this type of reunion, a revival of the latter-day Roman Empire. Let me just see if I've skipped anything here. I think this is I'm pretty sure this is a Christadelphian website, Prophecy and the News. I thought it was Prophecy in the News, but anyway. This is what we expect to see, and again, next week we'll take a look to see, are these guys on the same side? Right? Because they're supposed to be. If the image is going to stand, you got to have some same principles, same values, same religion, even if you water it down. So now, one of the great things is, some of the brethren, didn't maybe agree with Brother Thomas's view that Russia and the papacy and the beast would be together in the end, because there was no way the papacy would ever have anything to do with a communist, atheist country. And they were right. The papacy was Christian and a supporter of democracy, and they wouldn't have had anything to do with it. So some thought he was wrong. And then you had the fall of the Soviet Union, right? And I'm sure there were brethren, I didn't see anything, I didn't look for anything, but I'm sure there were brethren saying, we got to take another look at this Russia thing. Maybe we got it wrong. Look at them. They're no powerhouse. And they're supposed to be Christian too, in a democracy? And they're fallen. They're going to be a military might? So you looked at Russia in the 90s. How is that going to be? It's going to take generations for that to turn around. Well, it didn't, did it? It took a very short time when this guy came into power. They opened he said, we're going to go back to our ancient religion, Christianity, right? Opens 1,000 churches each year in Russia. They got 30-something thousand Orthodox Christian churches, right? These two meet several times. This little quote here, in the culture war for the future of mankind, Putin's planting his Russian flag firmly on the side of traditional Christianity. We're getting back to our Christian roots. He knows, you want to unify the country, you got to have some religion involved. So he brings that back. Church and state coming back together again, right? Considers himself to be the defender of Christianity, because he looks to the West, America, and says, are you kidding me? Look at them. They're a nightmare. You know what you won't find in Russia? Same-sex marriage. You're not going to find that in Russia. That is illegal. He's making attempts to put aside abortion, too. But anyway, so these two meet, and you remember the Syria crisis in Syria, right? When Obama said, you crossed the red line, so military action is going to come upon Syria. Well, the Pope calls up Putin and says, you have to defend Christianity in Syria. There was Christians in Syria, which I didn't know. But you have to do that. You're the one to do that. He was off to the G20 meeting, and Putin came out of it pretty proud. Pope has called me. I am the defender of Christianity. And he makes the call, right? It was the whole thing. I think it was John Kerry who just made a comment in an interview saying, well, what would stop them? I don't know. If they gave up their chemical weapons, maybe that would stop a military attack. I don't know. Boom, Putin's on the phone. They'll do it. They'll give up their chemical weapons, right? He stepped in and he saved, a military attack. Well, you didn't hear much after when all the people were being killed by the chemical weapons. You didn't hear much from the Pope saying, we got to save those people too. It was just save the Christians. So anyway, this buildup of Russia back into a Christian faith is a pretty remarkable event, especially how quickly it happened. And boom, are they a world military power again? Yeah, they sure are, right? And it happened very, very quickly. And, they're a democracy. He's an autocrat, but they're a democracy on face value, right? He wins every year. It's a landslide because he kills anyone who tries to go up against him, right? It's a pretty good way to do it. Not a real democracy, but anyway. So, does Russia really have any interest in Constantinople? Is that something that community's just kind of made up or what, right? So here's Moscow. It becomes the third Rome. And that is, this little thing down here. When Constantinople fell in 1453, the Russian church claimed the title of the third Rome from Moscow, right? Oh, so there is this connection here, right? And over here, some little pamphlet, but it talks, we're the third Rome. And you see this here? This is on the top of their Orthodox churches. You got the Christian cross. And under here, you got the crescent moon of Islam, right? Yeah, the Turks moved us out of there, moved us up to Moscow, but you know what? We're coming back. And one day, we'll take back Constantinople. And we'll move out the Muslims. Okay? Kind of interesting, right? You wouldn't believe this. Can you believe that? They found this mosaic of Justinian, and he has that hat. Make Istanbul Constantinople again. That's where Trump must have got the idea. Not only that, but the baseball cap preceded the game. Who knew? Right? Right? So you can see that this is on the minds of the Russian people, right? This was in a little quote I pulled out of some political magazine. It said, Putin is simply a reincarnated Justinian, trying to save what is left of the old Roman Empire, right? And the article went on to make some comparisons between Justinian. Justinian said, he always played that we were the victim. Well, that's exactly what Vladimir Putin did. The world is against us. Remember, they ignored us when we crashed. They did nothing for us, right? And he was a promoter of, we're going to get back the old empire from those barbarians. Nationalism, right? That's what Putin's big thing is. Wherever Russian-speaking people are, I'm coming to defend them, right? So they had a lot in common, and they were both an autocrat, and they were both trying to say it was Putin behind the whole, hey, Kirill, you're going to get along with the Pope, okay? Let's end this division. So that was started in at least 2016. So, now this is Vlad. Is this on the mind of them wanting to take Constantinople, which we know it's in Turkey, by the way. This is Vlad. He's not too happy, right? He says, should Turkey not stop supporting terrorists in Syria? So, right, this is just in 2016. I shall restore Constantinople to Christendom. That's quite a threat. That's an invasion, right? I'm knocking you out of there, right? So that's quite a threat, and he can back it up. And then this down here, Russia urges Turkey to give Hagia Sophia. Remember the Emperor Justinian? He was the one who built this magnificent thing, right? Give it back to the Orthodox Christians, and this is the place. So when the Turks came in, so Justinian builds this marvelous place, and then the Turks come in and they, hey, Christian churches, get rid of them. And then they came upon Hagia Sophia, and they went, this place is magnificent. We can't destroy it, we'll just convert it into a Muslim mosque. And that's what they did. Now it's a museum that people can go and see this. And this was after the Russian plane was shot down. It got a little too close to Turkey's border. And Turkey shot down the plane, if you remember that. And this is what they asked for. You want to make amends to that? Give us this back. Right? Pretty interesting, right? And Erdogan's response was, no, we're not giving it back. And he's trying to push forward to not make it a museum anymore, but make it an active Muslim mosque again. That's not going to sit too well with this guy. So, these are, we see this stuff in our headlines. Our community's been talking about it for a long time. Daniel 11 says the king of the north, who we think is going to be Russia, is going to come down against him. That is the occupier of Constantinople. And he's going to take over that territory. And there's a lot of reasons why for it. I mean, Hagia Sophia was the prized possession of the Orthodox Christian Church. Constantinople is the heart of that Orthodox Church, and he's bringing that back to Russia. But of course, there's some great advantages militarily to having that, because you control the Bosphorus Straits, and from the Black Sea, you can come right down into the Mediterranean. Okay, so he can cover it up with, this is what we need religiously, but he's got different motives. And so we see it in the headlines today. Our community's been talking about it for a long time. Now, can never judge how much time I need. So the false prophet, right? So we've discussed the beast. It's the EU today. We've got Constantinople. That's the dragon, the power that's going to occupy. The false prophet. That's pretty simple for us. I think we don't have to spend too much time on this. 2 Thessalonians, don't be fooled by what they say, for the day will not come, right? Until the apostasy, until there is a great rebellion against God, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the one who brings destruction. He will exalt himself, defy everything that people call God and every object of worship. He will even sit in the temple of God, claiming that he himself is God. So who does that? All right, Pope Pius said, that I am the Holy Father, the representative of the God of the earth, vicar of Christ, which means I am God on earth. There's really no one else that claims to be God. Many have probably tried to come and say, hey, I'm Jesus, right? And then they die and the whole thing vanishes. So we could go into, anyone have a problem with the false prophet? We know who the false prophet is. It's not Muhammad, like the Catholic Church would like us to believe. He comes onto the scene way too late. We could go into some references that talk about, hey, the problem is coming from within Christianity, right? Paul says it's happening now, right? And on and on and on. But for time's sake, I think we're pretty comfortable in who the false prophet is. Is everyone okay with that? So now I want to get to, we got the characters. I want to get to some of the crazy language here of chapter 13, verse 13, chapter 16, verse 13 of Revelation. And it talks about the frogs, right? So this frog-like spirit. So if we go back to Exodus, because that's what that reminds us of, it's the first time we have these frogs, it reminds us of the plague of the frogs. So if we go to Exodus chapter 8, I'll pick it up in verse 1. It says, And the Lord spoke unto Moses, Go unto Pharaoh, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Let my people go, that they may serve me. And if thou refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite all thy borders with frogs. And the river shall bring forth frogs abundantly, which shall go up and come into thy house, into thy bedchamber, upon thy bed, into thy house of thy servants, and upon thy people, into thine ovens, into thy kneading troughs, and frogs shall come up upon thee, upon thy people, and upon thy servants. They're going to go everywhere, right? So then in verse 7, it says, "And the magicians did so with their enchantments and brought up frogs upon the land." So they were able to copy what God had done. And then in verse 8, it says, "And then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, Entreat the Lord that he may take away from me the frogs from my people, and I will let your people go, that they may do sacrifice unto the Lord." Did he let them go? No, right? It was a false promise, right? So when we look elsewhere in the Bible for frogs, right, we want to let the Bible interpret the Bible, right? It says this in the Psalms, he sent sorts of the flies among them, which devoured them, and frogs, which destroyed them. And the land teemed with frogs, which went up into the bedrooms of their rulers. So it was everywhere. It was in your house. It was in your food. It was on you. It went from the servant right up into the king, in their bedrooms, right in their minds. And they're destructive, and they're corrupt, and they're associated with a false promise of freedom. So that's the kind of the characteristic we get from the frog. Okay, well, these were unclean as well, right? So this is the book of Leviticus, right? And it's talking about, the clean and unclean animals. And this is what it says about those things that are in the sea and the rivers, that does not have fins and scales among the teeming life of the water and among all living creatures that are in the water. They are detestable things to you and shall be abhorrent to you. You may not eat of their flesh, and their carcasses you shall detest. I mean, that's pretty strong language for something that God created, isn't it? I mean, God created the frog. They would fall into that category. So there's got to be something symbolic to it as well. And when we talk about things that are unclean, that can mean it's detestable, abhorrent, an abomination, loathsome, sinful, wicked, vile, and it's often associated with idolatry. Right? So I think that's the symbolism there, right? So, for God has not called us into uncleanness, but unto holiness. So this unclean, frog-like is not very good. Now the spirit. Well, the spirits are teachings, right? Do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. Right? And the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits or teachings. Right? Give heed to seducing spirits. They're things that appeal to the flesh. That's humanism. Always appeals to the flesh because that's what it's about. So when we come here and we then flip over to, let's get back into Revelation 16. We'll go to verse 14 as it continues.
I have a quick word. Did you know
What
the Catholic Church authorized eating frog legs on Friday back in 2015 because the Texans and Louisianans wanted it?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah. And I think it was the no meat on Friday was because they had interest in the fish markets, right? So, Revelation 16, verse 14 says, "For they are the spirits of demons," right? Demons in the New Testament, mental illness, right? That's what it describes when Jesus heals the man with the demon. It's describing some mental illness. So it's the teachings of madness, right? And it's like the plague of the frogs. This madness goes everywhere. It goes on to say they're working miracles that go forth unto the kings of the earth in the whole world, right? So just as, the spirit of Egypt were brought back to Egypt, right, with the whole plagues, right? The spirit of Egypt was sin, right? Pharaoh opposed what God had to say, right? And he did it with the encouragement of his magicians. They were able to copy a couple of those plagues. I don't know how they brought forth the frogs, but maybe God said, "Yeah, go ahead. If you want to bring forth, I'll allow that, maybe, because that's what I'm doing." Right? So I don't know how they did it, but they did, and he was able to, with these achievements of man, he was able to do that, and that's what humanism does. Humanism opposes God's will, right, and it puts forth science, the miracles that man can do. Hey, we can clone. We can create life. What do we need God for? And God, listen, you create them male and female? Not anymore, buddy. We decide what genders we're going to be. We can change them. You don't have any rule over us. We now make these decisions. Right? They're miracles, man's achievements. Right? We replace, the Word of God with man's rules, man's laws. And there's a great danger in that. Okay, so just one more slide and I'll let you go. So now this next slide, it's not the King James, it's not the NIV, ESV, it's the scriptures according to me. So, not really. All I'm doing is taking out the symbolism of the scriptures and replacing it with what it represents. Because remember, Jesus is giving us a message. I'm warning you about the teachings, the spirit of the world. It's going to be everywhere, and I got a warning to you because it's going to affect you. And so these are the teachings. Do we take them for what they are, right? I saw 3 loathsome, sinful, wicked teachings. Like frogs, these teachings, they're destructive, they're corrupt, they're filled with false promises. For they are the teachings of madness, working perceived miracles by promoting idolatry and man's achievements. It is the humanistic philosophy that is deceiving the whole world, gathering them that oppose God to battle against God. So when we break down the symbolism and put in what it represents, this is quite a message. And no wonder why Christ is saying, watch yourselves, keep your garments clean. It's going to be a problem. He wouldn't tell us if it wasn't going to affect his servants, the ecclesia. Right? So next week, we're going to see the developments of this humanism and how it's developed, how it's gotten throughout all the world, how it came into Christianity, and guess what? How it can affect the ecclesia. There's no reason why Jesus would want to give us this message. To be ready, I'm coming back, this is going to be your problem. He wouldn't have told us that if it wasn't going to affect the ecclesia. So we'll take a look at that not next week, 2 weeks. Any comments?
So that's the first book of Books, chapter 13?
That's it. That's it. Anything else? Okay.